the turn of the 20th century, that kind of thing.
I'm not going to show you.
Uncertainty and like.
All right, grab seats.
I did it first.
Grab seats. Okay, I'll say a little something. Just to, yeah. Hi everyone, this is the second lecture. A lot of you were here last week, for which I'm very grateful. I'm really excited. This is a philosophy lecture. I think it answers when you were telling me about it, I noticed that it answered one of the questions that I ask myself every day, which is when we live in a world where we have very little impact, how do we actually find meaning in our lives and continue to live? So I'm really excited to find a hopeful answer. But no pressure.
I don't know.
I don't have any lectures booked for the next coming weeks, so if you want to present something, be my guest and hit me up if you have an idea that you want to talk about. And with that, Cooper Stoy.
Again, my name is Cooper. This is a lecture on a few long-running working theories of my own, mostly interpreted through and re-expressed through a few different books and different socio-political, philosophical people who I fuck with heavy and whose work I wish to continue through instances like this. Fracture in the revolution of everyday life. You'll come to see what that means. In search of the miraculous and sort of answers or follows what Hiro was just saying of I don't think I'm gonna give you an answer to what is miraculous here and now for us, but I can damn sure try, so I'm happy to be here. And I did write central question, although there's two. The first question being, why does it fucking feel like this? And if you're wondering what that means, and if you're wondering what this means, it means this. It means whatever you're feeling. It means, whatever has you happy, whatever has you discontented, whatever has you confused. It's not I'm not aiming at one emotion with this. I'm saying that why does it feel like this? Why does it feel exactly as it does now, today? And whether that's wholly negative or wholly positive, I don't have the answer. But it's definitely something worth thinking about, in my opinion. And to take that question further, I'd like to ask, where can freedom, authenticity, or revolutionary possibility be found in the ordinary? Because these are questions we ask ourselves especially as students at a university such as this, and a lot of young people involved in and aware of such atrocities, such complexities. Always referencing ourselves again through the government, through the governments of other nations, the geopolitical circumstances that are not only occurring but are occurring in our lives in a certain way. Especially living in Los Angeles, we live in Hollywood, and Hollywood is always a stage that re-represents the world, re-represents all of the world's miseries and accomplishments, whether we like it or not. So we're subject to those things. And we'd like to experience freedom in our own lives. We'd like to experience freedom for the peoples around us and the peoples around the world. But it's not always, it's obviously not so simple to solve the world's issues, to stand up for yourself and the people around you, and in the sense that the government is a tough trick. It's an institution you don't know how to deal with. And yes, there are certain democracies that we can participate in, but our freedom appears to be ultimately up to us. And another thing we see in the government and in the institutions around us is a lack of authenticity that debases us, confuses us, and it is something that we're always calling for in ourselves, in the people around us, and as well as in the institutions that represent us. And achieving either freedom or authenticity always feels necessary, or it feels reliant on change. We want change. We call for change. We stand in the streets. We stand on our campus calling for change. But if you've ever participated in or been a part of a large protest or something, there's this deep sinking part of yourself that it just fears the impotency of the movement, and you wonder, like, how will this exactly change what's going to happen? And even if the institution changes, maybe I won't, or maybe the change will be, like, eventually find itself in the same ills that the current institution finds itself. And so that's why I ask us to look at the ordinary, the everyday life. This lecture will be not necessarily framed through this book, but there is this book, The Revolution of Everyday Life, by Raoul Vaneigem, who's a Belgian author, philosopher, just kind of a guy who made a bunch of stuff that was really smart and cool. I think it was released originally in French, so the translation from French to English is a treatise on etiquette for the use of younger generations, and that's a big part of the reason that I'm using this book, because it appears that he knew something was coming, as did many of the great authors of the 20th century. You always hear them talking about, like, oh, things are bad now, but they sort of have this premonition about how much worse things are going to get. And it's quite subjective. Who can say whether things are better or worse? But I think we find ourselves with a few manuscripts that from the past that offer a sort of detached but wholly human explanation for the world, and just offer an opinion that might not have been able to appear were it written today. And that leads me to the 1960s. Well, I literally, all it says is the 1960s. I just put that on there like an hour ago. But that was an interesting time. It was a time when there was a global response to imperialism, a global call for anti-imperialism, a international response to oppressive forces, an international question of authority, a question of freedom, and a question of authenticity. All around the world, we were presented with, governments, be them democratic, dictatorial, communist, socialist, whatever it be. And there were a lot of people, there were hippies, there were freaks, there were revolutionaries. And so that's all of the literature that I'm referencing comes from the 1960s and the surrounding years, and I'm sure we all have an understanding of at least the sort of sentiment that arose then, if not just the hippies, then some other people who were pretty upset about what their lives looked like, whether it be in America or anywhere else. The first notion I would like to touch on that appears in the Revolution of Everyday Life, as well as, obviously, if you've read any bit of Marx or anything following Marx, you will know this notion of alienation, and if you haven't read any of that, you'll probably also know this notion of alienation. And these are a few words that appear in the Revolution of Everyday Life that I think helps us understand how and why alienation exists today. Essentially, you're existing as a part of a structure, as a part of a government, as a part of a social circle, a social life that in some way determines who you are. And as that social structure develops, it has more of a stake in your action, and especially as we see economic and political bodies, political institutions grow and develop, you become more and more alienated from them by virtue of their imposition on culture. Like, I mean, think about the difference of being in, you know, if we were living in the 90s and you know, you were, or let's say the 80s, you were looking at the government, you were responding to the government, you were reading the newspaper, you were, you know, there was a sense of alienation then, but you were, it was kept in a sort of developing news media, it was kept in a sort of very quickly developing culture. And now so much of what we know of the media, of the government, is like fucking Barstool Sports and podcasts and like Instagram reels, where it's like, holy shit, I've been taken so far away from what it means to be a political body, what it means to be a member of a you know, of a society, of a nation. And that's where that notion of alienation comes from. Originally in Marx, it comes from labor, which obviously very understandable these days, where, you know, you are going into a job and like you're just doing it. You're doing what you're asked because that's what has been set out for you. But to think about your boss is one thing. You can be like, fuck that guy, but to think about his boss and to think about the fundings that are undermining your labor, that are coming in for whatever, you know, whatever company you're working for or anything, you're lost, you're alienated from it, you're completely separated from it because it exists on all these grounds of science, of physics and like economic theory that you have nothing to do with. You're just you know, you're just stuck there. You're just doing your thing. You're surviving off of an entity that has nothing to do with you. You know, and it's so far from you. And that's where this final quote that I put there. I won't read all of it, but I possess badges of power, therefore I am. And in an alienated, a fractured, and a disenfranchised society, we all, as humans, I mean, before the 21st century, we all want our piece of the pie. You know, you want to be something, you want to know something, you want to have something. But in a world where, with the onset of technology, with the onset of mass media, mass production, we have everything. Nearly, like with the internet, with AI, nearly everything is available to us. And so, if you're a human wanting a piece of the pie, you have access to fucking everything. And so as you see culture develop in this way, where you can be the shining star of any industry because there's infinite industries. You can know the most about one topic because you can access any topic. Everybody can be a star and a leader. And then that further alienates us, that separates us from each other because we're all vying for our own badges of power that not only become ours, but they end up representing us and becoming our identity as opposed to our humanity. I'd like to touch on some other literature. I'm sure we all listen to music. I'm sure we all have read at least one book before, or have been on the internet. And
Violence.
So, there are a lot of songs and books out there, and if you read them or if you listen to them, you notice that most of them behave in the same way that this lecture would, in a thematic sense, in an answering of a question. There's a central question to every song, to every piece of literature, and so at this point, in a world where everybody's making their own goddamn music, they're writing their own books, writing their own poems, we're all doing it, there's nothing wrong with that, it's okay to make stuff. But now that so much is able to be produced, we live in a world where a lot of the songs have already been made. Every perspective has been expressed in the song, and if it hasn't been expressed in the song, there's a book about such a vast variety of instances, and everyone's trying to answer that same question that I put on the first slide, a sort of in search of the miraculous. If my life feels like this drolling every day, what else is there? And if religion isn't enough, if participation in a social structure, in my job, in my friend group isn't enough, then what else is there? And sometimes it's love, sometimes it's, anything. But I think that's another alienative force, is the fact that so many perspectives have been offered. You grew up listening to a million stories about and they aren't just stories, they all have a message. You remember in all your English classes early on, you're like, oh fuck, what's this sentence about? What's this book stabbing at, And so you're like, this guy's really got it. And then you read the next book and you're like, shit, maybe this guy's got it. And you could probably do that forever, I think. And maybe that's good. Maybe that's what life's all about, and I'm wrong here. But it is quite interesting, and it does put us out, in a sense, to have been offered so many perspectives, living in another time prior to any sort of globalization, global culture, global media. You would not be offered such a variety of perspectives, coming from a variety of places, not only the people around you. And so we're just saddled with a bunch of shit, and not just a bunch of shit. We're saddled with a bunch of this is what life means shit, and that's a lot. And sometimes you'll be at a party, and the only conversation you can manage to get out with somebody is oh, everything is wrong. What's wrong with you? What do you think? What should we do about this? What matters? And it's I don't know. Maybe we should just chill out or something. I don't know, but we're experiencing that, and we can go on. I forgot about this one. There's an episode of Family Guy where Peter Griffin finds out he's a genius, and upon finding this out, he begins to describe almost everything that he does not agree with as both shallow and pedantic. And I feel like he hears those words on some show or something. But and I think I was watching Family Guy with Brooke or in my apartment or something. I was watching this episode and I was like, damn it, you really could say that. Especially when you're looking at this variety of perspectives, variety of meanings, possible philosophies for the world. You can look at everything and you can be like, well, at the end of the day, we're just people eating, fucking, sleeping, and whatever you got to say about it is essentially shallow and some sort of pedantry, some sort of focus on the niche and on all this information that we have as opposed to our experience. Pedantic in the sense that it's focused on certain infinite details that at the end of the day are kind of a toss-up and have nothing to do with whether you fall asleep at night, have nothing to do with whether your body is able to, wake up in the morning and carry itself through whatever grueling labor you could possibly be subjected to. And yeah, that's Peter Griffin's Che Guevara. I was watching the Adam Friedland show the other day, or maybe it was Adam Friedland on some other thing, but he was just like, he was really angry at the world about how everybody wanted to be and thought they were Che Guevara, and obviously Che's a cool guy, we like him, but like, that's what I mean in the sense of like, everyone's offering their perspective, everyone is trying to change the world in their way towards whatever ideas are set in their mind, because we have access to Instagram, we have the ability to posit our thoughts and our opinions into the world infinitely, and so we can all be the Che Guevaras of our own life, and maybe we're all just the Peter Griffins, but who knows, we can continue, sorry. This is one of the ones I just threw in there about an hour ago. Following this slide will be two theories on what we might contribute to the things that I've been saying to. These are two kind of abstract and novel things that I might stand up here and sound like an absolute maniac for the next two slides after this. But trust me, after that, it'll get a bit more concise, and then it'll evolve again. But here are two theories on what may contribute to the things I just said. Speaking of the 60s, we were in two pretty, we all know what the Cold War is, but prior to that we were in two pretty hot wars, so hot they spread all around the world. They were world wars, and they decided to do it a second time. They thought that would be a good idea, and then we were like, oh my God, we can innovate so hard, and so let's make the war cold. But it's also everywhere, It's even more of a world war, and it's even colder, and it's even hidden in places that you didn't know before. And I mean, none of us were alive during the Cold War, but there was a very deep paranoia that existed during the Cold War, because it was all of this new technology that we knew nothing about, that was being developed by these agencies that were like unbeknownst to us, that we were alienated from, and it was like nuclear, like we could all die in one day, guys, like holy shit, we could blow everybody up if we wanted to, or we could listen to all your conversations, or we could like poison your food or something. And then there was obviously like the 60s, the response to imperialism, as well as the response to the constituents of the Cold War, at least the large multinational constituents of the Cold War, and those were people being like, hey, what the fuck is going on, man? We just want to like smoke weed and go to wherever, or there was a lot of stuff in France, you know how the French are, and they were like, hey, we just kind of want to have a good time, and this all feels really weird, this is really scary, I don't want to die, I don't want everybody to die because one guy was like, hey, I don't think you should have said that, and I'm the president, so you're now eviscerated or have a million cancer. And so in a sense, I think it's possible that we were born as sort of veterans, injured veterans of this Cold War, where we were born scared. We were born to parents who were scared of something they didn't even know existed, or didn't know how it existed, or didn't know where it existed. And that's very similar to the way that the media presents itself, the way that the government presents itself, is that, as much as you can respond to the news headlines, you're always going to be like, yeah, but I know there's like 18 other decisions behind this. I know there's people that I've never even heard their name making decisions behind this. And so I think that contributes very greatly to our alienation, to our separation from each other, to our separation from our nations, to where we are, we're so scared and we're so confused that all we can do is just take and be like, you guys know Netspend? Like, do you like this? Like, I like this song so much. It means everything to me because I'm so scared of everything else and everything is so big. And I think that's a product of this shit. And the war can still be cold and existing in places as we don't know it. And it feels very warlike these days in a lot of ways because of the battleground, in the way that we are afraid, in the way that we are confused. This is an interesting one. When COVID happened, I think, very as simply as I can put it, we realized that the world would go on despite the way we had built it to be. In the sense of, especially since the 90s, you know how like the 80s, 90s were very like business, go to work, go home, make dinner in the microwave with your wife, and then that spread through the 2000s, and then COVID showed us that like you didn't even have to go into the building to do a lot of the jobs that America as well as other nations have really founded themselves on in the 21st century, was these jobs that were in the office, were research, were science, were office jobs in a sense. And then realizing that those things could occur without being there really like kind of subconsciously put a lot of people back in their like place to be like, oh shit, if I have to sit at home all day, well, whether you left your office job or whether you were dropped from a non-essential job, you were now at home and you were like, I'm still the same guy, I still have the same life, but my job, and my culture and all the people I interacted with, which was everything to me, is gone, and it's not there and it can't happen, but I'm still here. And so what matters then, especially in America where it was like so corporately, like corporation was essential, and being like an American dream was being a participant in that, and then we were left so debased by COVID in a lot of ways, and that's why a lot of our industries appear so confused these days, and like, because we're still left in the wake of that, where we're so apathetic now. The common culture is pretty apathetic in this. I mean, you talk to a lot of young people that are pretty apathetic. They're like, well, it's like, what even matters? Like, if I don't go to work, it doesn't matter. Like, I'm just a guy. And I think that a lot of that can be contributed to COVID. And those were just two examples I wanted to help instantiate the points that I brought up earlier. Move on. Okay. So there's too much stuff, right? There's just too much of it. There's a lot of it. And maybe that's scaring us. Maybe if there's too many opinions, we'll all die. And nobody will ever be right about anything. And then that's scary, Maybe we've made all the songs already, and maybe we've written all the books, and none of them were right. And that sucks. Maybe nobody has the answer. And we're just left with all this shit that we made. We made a bunch of stuff. We made a bunch of books and objects and houses and things, and it's all here. And what is it now? It's all there, and we're all in relation to a bunch of objects, a bunch of situations, a bunch of institutions, and that's scary. But what I said was, but this isn't a story about how boys and girls are evil. It's a story about everything in between and how to walk those lines. And going forth from this slide, I will step away from maybe the dooming that I put on you for the first half of this, and then try to offer a position on navigating those structures and navigating those structures in the wake of a lot of stuff, in the wake of the entirety of history that has preceded us. Oh, this is a quote from Immanuel Kant. I wanted to share this because it kind of leads us into the thing a little bit. I was playing GeoGuessr. If any of you have played GeoGuessr, gives you a random frame, and I'm not kidding. This was like the frame that popped up. I think it was in Argentina, and it was just a building that said evil. I'm not even sure why I put a slide in there. Yes.
It's a clothing brand in Argentina.
Okay.
I was just there.
Wow.
Bruh.
Well, I just think that's interesting, and I guess it does lend to the quote that I put. But out of the crooked timber of humanity, no straight thing was ever made, and I think that helps us reflect on what I've said so far. In that, people are subjective. People are weird, funky animals, and it's cool that we're innovating, and it's great that we're always innovating and progressing. But when we start to rely on our products as though they were essential, when we rely on our institutions and our governments and our products as though they were truth, as though what we had produced was fact, that's when we begin to alienate ourselves, because what we made is just it's just kind of the stuff we made, and it's not gonna humans are weird, and humans make a lot of accidents and mistakes, and that's what makes them very strong, and that's what makes this life worth living, is because you never know what's going to happen, and you never even know what you're going to do. So why would you ask why would you expect to know what anyone else is going to do, or expect that the concept that they came up with 40 years ago is going to hold true to your life, because no straight thing was ever made, and that's the beauty of progress. That's the beauty of revolution. As we change things, as we realize them, they grow, and they grow like we do. Like humans literally grow, and as should our things. But now I will get into the second of our focuses. Speaking of the 1960s, speaking of the freaky French, there was this group called the Situationists International. Imagine that there was a bunch of wars in the world, and all of the wars were kind of bad on one side and good on the other side, and a bunch of people were getting fucked and imperialized and genocided, and it was everywhere, especially in the global south, and the war with which we are all focused these days was still happening. The one that we stood on our campus and spoke out for or speak out about in any realm was happening already. It was already happening, and there was also a bunch more of them. And so you'd be pretty pissed if you were a little French boy and you were really just jacked up on whatever Frenchness is, and you were like, oh, me and all these other hot 20-year-old French people we should fucking fix this. Like we know what to do because we're artists, and because we're hot and we're 20 years old, and it's France, and France is always right, and France has been through a revolution, and so that's the Situationist International. They don't really want to accept their name because we don't go by name, but they're all dead. So and the main guy, Guy Debord, he wrote all the stuff kind of, but it was a collection of people. He wrote he just wrote all the stuff. And then Raoul Vaneigem, who wrote The Revolution of Everyday Life, was a a friend and constituent of the Situationists International. And essentially they run in that realm of the revolution of everyday life where, okay, maybe we can't stop war in Vietnam on our own, and we will try our damnedest to. We will shut down the universities, we'll take from the streets, we'll do whatever we can. But at the end of the day, it's not necessarily going to stop at our hands, but we will do whatever we can. And so what then can we do? And how might we look at what is happening in front of us and be able to feel authentic, be able to feel free as members of our own lives? Because we are inevitably members of the world and members of our nation, but we're also, you will never be in a room without yourself, and that's a difficult thing to wrestle with, and that's where the notion of everyday life comes in, because it's like anything could be happening in the world. All the things about history that I just explained could be a lie. Whatever was happening in the world, you'd be there. Everyday life would be what it is, and so that's where they pose themselves, and you could call them hedonists if you wanted to. Specifically by this quote that I think encapsulates a lot of what they do, is social illness is purged by leisure. Social illness referring to a lot of the things I've talked to previously. But leisure is their answer to the questions that I've posed. And leisure is a complicated thing because you might think of like golf or doom scrolling. That's what was going to come out of my mouth, but I wasn't sure if that was correct. But because there's that, how funny is that? But leisure is a sort of I'll touch on it more as I go. But leisure is their answer. Leisure is, everything sucks. Let's have fun. If I'm going to put it in a way that I shouldn't put it, but they come to this French term, the dérive, which is French for drift. And here, I'm Bogdan likes Wikipedia, so I use Wikipedia. This is what they say is an unplanned journey through a landscape, usually urban, in which participants stop focusing on their everyday relations to their social environment. So, well, if it was the 1960s, they couldn't really put their phones down. But imagine putting your phone down and just, I mean, you can keep your phone, but just walk like a sort of, doesn't even matter. Like, it was focused on navigation, on traversal, less so navigation than traversal, of being in the world. That this sort of leisure is a being in the world, and that's where it's everyday life. And they use this term dérive to offer a concrete solution where you walk around your city and you're exposed to how weird everything is. You guys have walked around Los Angeles, the street signs are falling off, the cars are on fire, there's robots carrying our food, there's a bunch of people, and each of them has their own thing about them, and sometimes it's weird, and all the buildings are different, and all the buildings are built by different people who have different backgrounds, and that's just a lot of stuff to deal with. But you're there, aren't you? And you know what? You're there, aren't you? Move on. And this leads into something that not only the Situationists talked on, but a few other people, specifically the Situationists. What I just explained is a piece of something called psychogeography, which just refers to, the psychological relation to one's physical world. The philosopher Merleau-Ponty, in his Phenomenology of Architecture, says the body is our basic means of having a world. And that's sort of what this psychogeography touches on, in that no matter what's going on in the world, you are there, and your psychology is susceptible to it. And it especially lends to this drifting through the world, because whether you're going on long walks or not, you are drifting through this world, and you are subject to its contradictions. And that's sort of what I'm touching on here, is that those buildings you see that are built by a variety of people, the weird people you see that are like vodka sauce, Philly cheesesteak, salmon bite restaurants, like weird. I don't know if that makes any sense, but like you see a bunch of weird stuff when you go out, and that's why I use the word contradictions, because you're like, what is that? What does that have to do with me? Like why? Like there was somebody who spent their entire goddamn life thinking about the windows on this building, and like, what does that have to do with me? That has nothing to do with me. Like, there's someone whose livelihood is this restaurant, is this space that I'm navigating. Is my city is built up by all these things that are essentially inhuman in the fact that they are contrived from capitalist progression, in a sense. Or like, all the buildings were made, and all the restaurants were made, and all the stores were made, in a sense, to make somebody some money. And that's a contradiction to me, because that's not what I care about. I'm outside, I'm a person, I want to be in love, I want to get married, I want to have fun, and I don't want to die that much, really. And so you run into all these things. And a lot of people today are stabbing really hard at the truth. And people want to find the truth really bad. And people get really scared when things don't line up with their truth. And so I have this quote here to explain the contradictions. He spurns the things he sought and seeks anew what he just spurned. He seeds his life's askew. Hypocrisy is the best way to describe that. And I think a lot of us are so afraid to be hypocritical because, like I said earlier, we seek these badges of power. We want to know something, and that's what we have. That's our identity. So when you find out that you're wrong about your identity, you're wrong about maybe the political opinion you had for years, you're wrong about the social opinion you had for years, you find out that this musician you really liked did something really bad, and it sort of like debases and disenfranchises not only your interests, but the way that culture works now, it like disenfranchises your identity, because you're so latched on to your interests, you're so latched on to your existence is in the terms of your relation to all these objects, to all these situations in the world, that are social, that are your friend groups, that are your government, that are all these things. And so when you experience hypocrisy and when you find yourself hypocritical, you're upset and your life gets turned in the wrong direction. And the derive, the drift, sort of refers to a staring this contradiction in the face, into staring all the crooked timber of humanity in the face, of looking at it and realizing from it just what is. It's something that Bogdan said. It was the truth is just what's in front of us, is the postmodernism in a nutshell. And what's in front of you is hypocritical. What's in front of you is contradictory, but is there, and I'll have some answers on why that's okay. Yeah, I think I put the slides in a different order than I wanted to, but the more you walk and the more you witness things, and the more you're just entrenched in things and really give yourself in. That's what the derive really talks about. It is like sort of giving yourself in and like falling between things as you walk, and like letting yourself respecting the fact that you are subject of a hypocritical world. And the more that you do that, the more that you will understand all the weird, fractured, contradictory things, because you'll understand that they're just there, and that's what it is. And then the more you'll be able to experience yourself and experience other humans for what they are, as opposed to their relation to the objects of which they are convicted, of the institutions or beliefs or opinions to which they are convicted. The more that you are really just emptying yourself out and walking through a twisted building that has nothing to do with you and watching what that is, like there's like, it sort of just like lets your humanity be what it is, because you are like understanding that there is so much that is, it's not right or wrong, it's just is, and it's there, and then you become one of those things. You forgive yourself for being a hypocrite. You forgive yourself for being contradictory, because, you know, maybe everyone's. If all this stuff is so wrong, so odd, maybe it's okay to be wrong. I might not talk about all this, but I did really like that. Honestly, I've read like all of Guy Debord's writing, the guy who was the main situationist, and honestly my favorite quote of his is, "I will anyway discuss some facts and put forward some considerations." And if that doesn't just encapsulate what I'm doing here, it does lend itself to that notion of humanity and that notion of honesty, of just existing as a member of the contradiction, and forgiving yourself for that, and not letting yourself rely on some pursuit of truth or some pursuit of objects that are foreign to you and alienated from you. I'm just going to talk about some stuff and put forward some considerations, and that may be it, but that's good enough for me, in a sense. The movie Daisies, has anyone seen the movie Daisies? There's a similar quote at the end of that movie, and it's, "I am sometimes eating chipped beef, I am sometimes eating stumped beef on toast, sometimes not, and never upset." And I think that's a very similar quote. We can skip this one. There's some like weirdly sexual what did Freud do? What did Freud do?
All sorts of stuff.
No, what made
Psychoanalysis.
psychoanalysis. There's weirdly sexual things that I could talk about, but I'm not going to.
Okay.
So we can skip.
Oh, fire.
And so this is sort of, I kind of already said the things that are here, and I just put two sort of absurd pictures as to help us further our understanding of how weird things are. There was the picture, one of the pictures that was found on Bin Laden's laptop. It was the kid from the Cat in the Hat movie, and Avril Lavigne. Which is just like, how? You know, how are we here? How did we get here? And so right down here is that notion that I've been getting out of. You begin to sympathize with the missteps of man. You forgive yourself for committing fallacies or believing definitions that turned out to be wrong when you give in a way to the flow of accident, to the flow of humanity, to the flow of what is right in front of you. You begin to sympathize with man for his accidents, and then maybe you can begin to solve the problems that are plaguing the world. If you want an argumentative to debate positioning yourself above everyone else in some sort of hierarchy. There is no hierarchy in the drift. You are one of the contradictions. You are one of the misstepping men. You fuck up sometimes, and you see that in everyone else. And if you have a group of people who understand that about the world, maybe then they can begin to work to solve those insurmountable issues, to begin those global or national revolutionary possibilities. You can see things that weren't possible before you committed to definitions and to specific nomenclatures that didn't end up being any more worthwhile than your own humanity. And that's what the Situationists would call situations. You create situations when you step into this world, and these situations are the opposite of alienation in that they exist in respect of humanity, in respect of possibility, in respect of making mistakes, in respect of accidents, in respect of hypocrisy, in respect of being a person. And there's a quote from William Burroughs. He says it's somebody's last words, but I think he just said that in like a poetic way. He's like, these are the last words of Hassan Sabah, which is just Hassan and then Hassan backwards. So I think he was, but he says, listen, look, or shit forever. And that's sort of an encapsulating phrase for what I'm talking about. Listen, look, or shit forever, in the sense of, when you get upset, sometimes you can be like, that Broccoli song by Dram, where they're like, look at the trees, man. Look around, bro. Look at life. Yeah, look at life. Look at the water, man. Look at. Never mind, I'm not gonna say the rest of it. But that's where I'm stabbing at. But I don't know what's next, but. Oh. I think this is where we find our conclusion, because I've spoken in a lot of universal terms and a lot of detached language about things that aren't very familiar to us, and about countries that we don't live in. But where I find myself practicing this, whether I mean to or not, sometimes I just get stranded in Hollywood. I have a lot of weird people in my life, and so I kind of just end up a lot of places. I always have, and I don't have a car, and so maybe it's just an accident that I know these things, or that I'm forced to commit a sort of drift, or commit a sort of re-representation of the Derive in Los Angeles. But I think it's an interesting place to do that, because we are exposed to everything. Like, if you go to any city in the world, yeah, there's a bunch of stuff, and because of globalization, because of Instagram, Twitter, everybody knows everything everywhere. But Los Angeles specifically has this like deep connection to culture, deep connection to universal culture, where we are the stage, and it feels like every global issue is sort of reflected through our city, whether it occurs in protests about that thing, or, you know, like it feels like we're so inundated with those things. And you see that whenever you're out in Los Angeles, and you know, you can stay happily in Westwood, but you still won't be staying happily in Westwood, because we live in a number 1 or 2 public university in the country, which is sat next to a massive and dysfunctional VA hospital, which is under weirdly funded, weirdly controlled. I do have insider information that there will be construction there soon, and it will be developed, but it's very interesting to, not only does UCLA sit in next to like thousands of dead veterans, like isn't that a contradiction? Like holy shit, like we're so like And then the FBI building, Jesus Christ, like where are we, man? And you're out here with like a lot of very well-off people, very intelligent people, very like motivated for changing the world people, but the restaurants in Westwood are, constantly changing. Half of the buildings here aren't open. You don't have to walk around the entirety of Los Angeles to notice some contradictions. You can walk out your front door and see like the monolith through which all of like ice came through and like fucked your city. And it's just the FBI building that's right there, and then you're going to like that's a good example of the contradiction. Is to look at that and then to be like sat drinking your like coconut water from the UCLA store in your class, and then you really are so subject to contradiction in the way that, like, especially having a federal building sat next to a VA hospital, the federal building, which is meant to be protecting our people, meant to be enacting justice and welfare, and then there is a like goddamn prison of all the people who have been destroyed by that system, destroyed by our country, and they spill out into our streets, and that's a contradiction. And as much as we can't change that immediately, we can experience something different when we look at our own town that way, and when we respect all of what it is, as opposed to just walking and getting your burger and being like, who's that crazy guy, and Westwood is a good example because not everybody has been everywhere, but the longer you walk, the more things you look at. Los Angeles is a big contradiction. It's a bunch of people who are disenfranchised with their country and who reject reject nationalism because we are scared of authority and we are scared of what our government will do, and so we're scared to participate in it. And so, as much as Gavin Newsom sucks, there is a big responsibility of the people there. And so you look at all this glamorous, all the media's coming out, like, I don't know, who's even here? Is David Dobrik still a thing? I don't know. But like, everybody who's making TikToks, and then you're like, oh, they live in Los Angeles, everybody who's making their music and stuff, and like all this high culture, high fashion, really positioned next to, you bend downtown, like, none of the lights on the signs work. If you've been downtown recently, like, how can this be a prosperous city? Like, how can we claim for this? Like, claim this to be, how can we even call this Los Angeles? This used to be everything. This used to be like the bastion. Oh, and I guess I don't have an answer for any of that, for how to fix these issues, but I think we can begin to get there for Los Angeles, and we can begin to get there for each other, and we can begin to get there for the world if you at least listen and look and walk and consider, because none of us really want shit forever, and we're all gonna kick the bucket one day. Not to make this too funny, but I don't know. It might be good to know what's in front of you, and it might make everything else make a little bit more sense if you really paid attention to the contradictions. It might make you forgive yourself a little more, and forgive your friends a little more, if you really looked at how difficult it is to make things, how difficult it is to say things, and how kind of fucked the things we made in the past are. And we can only really change those if we really look at them, if we really sit in them, you have to really walk through them 150 times backwards, upside down on all fours, paint on their walls, write stories about them, set them on fire maybe, but who knows until we try.
Well, first of all, I want to say I'm really obsessed with this idea. Like, a lot of what you said really resonates with, like, especially how you said you've kind of been, like, drifting around, you know, like you don't have a car, like, these kind of things where it's, like, you kind of end up in these, like, weird situations. And I don't know, I just feel like I personally resonate with that a lot because, like, especially with, like, my friend, like, the best experiences I have with my friends always come when I'm, like, we're just, like, walking around somewhere, we, like, don't really know what we're doing, and we're just kind of, like, you know, you're just, like, wandering this, like, weird, I don't know, like, I I hung out with some of my closest friends, like, over the summer for a second, and we literally spent, like, maybe, like, 2 hours inside, like, a Ross, just because we were just, like, walking around, and we were just, like, looking at everything, and we were just, like, oh, yeah, like, there's, like, this thing, huh, like, what's the deal with this,
Yeah.
or, like, you know, and it's really, I really like this idea of just, like, you know, embracing, like, the weirdness of, like, everything that's around you, and just, like, someone decided that this is, like, a product that they're gonna put out, and, like, this is, like, what's the point of this? Like, everybody, like, everything has someone behind it, and I think that's a really beautiful, like, realization to, like, kind of experience.
Yeah, I like that you said that, because I think I got kind of maybe more serious than I meant to, and so I didn't just want to be like, yeah, one time I was, like, on the bus, and then this happened, but I think that does happen a lot, when you're, like, out with your friends, and you stumble in somewhere, and then, or you're, like, at a weird place that you've never been before, and then the conversation often goes to, like, why is this like this? Like, how did this happen? Like, why does it look like that?
Yeah.
Like, why are they making the music that sounds like that? Like, and I think that you definitely pinpointed a big, very, like when I say the ordinary, like finding these things in the ordinary, that's exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really resonated too with all the contradictions that you're talking about. Like I think LA especially is such a city of contradiction. In the sense that there's so much glamour, so much wealth. One of the richest cities in the world, one of the richest countries in the world. Yet the condition of things is just sometimes insane. My family immigrated to the U.S. and they went to the Walk of Fame and they're like, wow, I don't know, this feels like one of the poorest streets in where we grew up. What's going on here? And I think especially that lens I just think is very interesting in the sense of what is happening, why are there structures in place enforcing this? And I think something that I think is very pertinent to our time as well is we're seeing a lot of people, and in my opinion, voting against their interests now with our democracy and doing things that undermine them. And I guess I think there's a lot of debate over what next step should be in terms of how we treat these people, because I think it's tempting to be these people voted for something bad, they should be blamed for it. I guess the relation of people and their systems, what do you think the path going forward for that is? Hard question.
Just ask for
No
what
answer.
started
No answer. Actually no answer.
No, I can stab at it. I don't know, you make me think of I have friends with some bad people, but I know people, and sometimes you're around somebody, and I mean, maybe I'm a bad example because I kind of let anything happen to me, but I'll be I talk to a lot of people who live on the street, and will do anything and be anywhere, and obviously I'm a white man in America, and I have a certain privilege in doing that. But I mean, I do know a lot of people who look out at the world and look especially at unhoused people, or look at the unoccupied buildings and the disrepair in Los Angeles, and are just ew, what the fuck? let's
It's
go.
a
So, let's go
shithole.
somewhere nice. Like,
Yeah,
let's,
yeah.
let's just go to like the nice place that's
Yeah.
like sat in between like a half-burnt building, and, like,
Yeah.
some construction project that's been
Yeah.
going on for like 10 years, and so yeah, a part of you wants to like to enjoy that and to be like, okay, let me just enjoy what's in front of me, and you want to be like, and then another part of you is like, fuck you for being so inconsiderate and not thinking these people are humans, or realizing how like the situation that our city is in and the fact that something could be done about it. I think the only answer I know to that is just like disposing the people around you to things like that. I'm like a fan of introducing my friends to people I know who live on the street in Westwood, or like taking people interesting places. And I don't have like a grand political like so here an idea. And even my own parents, like whenever either of them come to visit me, like I'm very much like, look at that, like I know, like let's get a good meal, but like, do you see what's across the street? And I mean, I'm very like materialist, and I'm talking about the everyday life, and so obviously my answer is to just like do what you can in your life to like show the people around you. But I think a lot of people aren't voting for what they believe in because there are traditionalist values and nationalist values that do end up supporting the nation or supporting your city and supporting infrastructure and supporting the everyday life of people. But a lot of people are so against any sort of nationalism or any sort of like, conflating it to like patriotism, and so that's why people, I think, vote against their beliefs a lot of the time. And I don't know, man. It's hard. Just talk to as many people as you can. I think.
Yeah, I like that one.
Did you?
Yeah, bro.
I guess I kind of want to circle back to like the Army veteran from the Cold War thing. Spiel. Like, I don't know if you're familiar with Vasily Arkhipov. He, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, like, he was on like some area with nuclear launch code bugs or whatever, and he was the last everyone else wanted to like press the launch codes, and this guy was like, no, don't do that. So I would say, like, with that in mind, yes, we are all veterans of the Cold War, and we can all pretty much owe our existence to that guy.
Yeah, because I was thinking mostly to like the fear, like when you think about the Cold War, you hear a lot of like, I mean, there's like McCarthyism, and there's, which go on about that and how that has made its way through history, but yeah, that sort of fear. And then I also think it's interesting you bring that up because I don't know, I think I was going to put a slide in here about how we rely on like these truths, and you want the government to be true, you want the government to be right, but ultimately it's the volition and decisions of a bunch of people who are no more or less human and no more or less fallible than you, and every action of every institution, whether it be UCLA, whether it be the government, the federal government, or the local government, there will always be at some level that guy who thinks sort of in the same way that you do, and could be the reason that things, the Cuban Missile Crisis, like, went a whole different way. And I think that's a good thing to recognize. And that's part of what I was saying, just like recognizing the humanity in things. I think that's a very good example to bring up.
So I was in Boston over the summer, and I think one of the reasons that city was really interesting to me was because it's a contradiction. Like I said, like everything's a contradiction, but I ran through, I think, every neighborhood in Boston and every street and surrounding city. And I think the biggest contradiction was for me was I was in this like super immigrant community that I was like, this is Boston. Like,
It's the most expensive city in the country, huh?
it is. So I mean, like, look, I ran to like I was staying near like the medical stores, and if you just run like one block down in a direction where no one goes for a lot of reasons, you see a bunch of people who are in need of healthcare, right? Like that's just like my example. But I ran into this like one immigrant community where no one spoke English, and I realized this because when I was hit by a car, and they tried to help me, and I was like, I can't really talk to you, but I appreciate you here. What was interesting to me the most is that they called 911 for me. But as soon as they called 911, everyone ran inside. And the police officer was like right around the corner. And it was like at this time where I was like, oh, I'm like very grateful that someone was there to stop bleeding. But also like, why is the police officer here? Why am I grateful for this, but also like not happy with it, right? And I feel like that kind of realization only happens when you put yourself in a situation, when you wander. Like that's what running to me has to become. It's like in LA, every time I go on a run, I go somewhere different, right? But it's all just wandering.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that you bring that up because I'm coming from a perspective, and we're all coming up from a perspective where we have the option to wander and not the necessity. And that's, like I was saying, I do talk to as many people as I can in as many situations as I can, and that's always a thing that you run into. Like that contradiction of the police, especially, is like I hate them. I hate the police so much, and I know a lot of people who hate the police a lot, and that's such a that's a great example of a contradiction of being like, oh, there are things that calling 911 will serve, but then there's like, you just have to like weigh the pros and cons, and there are so many people in this country that are like will not be treated well, or will be collateral to the police and to that institution. And I think that's a very, very real contradiction that we see, especially in like big wealth gap cities like here or Boston or most cities these days. But yeah.
Most of your lectures seem to circle around like a prescribed new philosophy for engaging in the world that is constituted in a kind of adventurism or existing amongst that I, as a person who has lived with you for going on a year and a half now, know that you and we as college students from, I don't know, like families with capital and the ability to now at this point in our lives engage in more adventurism, and I know you to be a person who can and does venture further and wider than most people I know. And if this is like not a prognosis, but a diagnosis for reincorporating with oneself, I guess in what capacity do you expect your average person to be able to practice this? And I guess running seems to me like I don't know, something that is palatable to people who are focused on various types of commercially and commonly accepted goodness and wellness of being, that is just like having a good career, staying healthy, staying fit, and things like that.
And then leisure.
Yeah.
Leisure is the secret third thing.
Okay.
It's less so wandering than it is leisure. But wandering is a good example of it. Drift is a better word.
Mm-hmm.
That's why they use it. I think you know, as well as some other people may know, that the word play is tossed around a lot in postmodernism. Play meaning exactly what you might think it means, leisure.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important for what I'm saying that there is no universal prognosis. There is no universal definition of or instructions for what to do, what not to do, how to do it. It's presence and it's play, and you could never figure out what to do if you didn't first look at what's in front of you. And I think that's the notion of like everyday life, is like prescribing to yourself a sort of play that can only exist in your circumstance, and then that makes it better because it does only exist because of you, because of what is in front of you. And I think that makes it personal, like, I don't know, but also I don't know. But also, like, I don't know.
Just the question that leisure is a commodity that is disparately distributed, just in being something that is able to be done. We spoke of Daisies, you quoted Daisies, and that was a movie that only you and I have seen, but it's just these two girls. And they don't necessarily come from wealth per se, but they're just beautiful, and they utilize that as just like an item of capital, and they're able to do whatever the fuck they want. These two, like, what are they, Romanian girls or something? And they just like are in pursuit only of pleasure and of living amongst. And
think of a contradiction that exists there. I'm not saying that homeless people have it better because they have a bunch of time to fuck around. That's not what I'm saying. But it's something to consider. And it's like a bell curve of sorts. And that's why the middle class is bad. You know, like what you're referring to is like everyone in America wants to live in the middle class, and then like the middle class that we built up over the last, century, I guess, it like negates leisure. It's very far from like in your leisure has to be very like prescriptive, or just very prescriptive. And then like, I don't know, I grew up in the swamp in South Carolina, and I grew up in my family in a lower income situation than I currently am, as well as like around a lot of people in that same situation, as well as like even lower income. And like, I think a lot of it can be related to like childhood wonder and like whatever sort of situation you're in. And like, I don't know, I just played in the mud, and like you just play in the mud a little bit, I guess, whatever your mud might be. I don't know. What do you think about it?